A street girl found a millionaire's daughter missing for months in the middle of a garbage dump. The reason was the city of Manchester awoke under a sky laden with grey clouds that seemed to weigh heavily on the buildings and busy avenues. It was one of those days when the air felt dense, foreshadowing rain, and people hurried their steps along the sidewalks as if trying to escape something invisible. For Lord Santana, however, that morning began like all the others for the past 15 years. Her alarm clock rang at 5 in the morning, and she rose without complaint, prepared a strong black coffee, put on her faded blue uniform and left home before the sun had fully risen. Lord's was 42, but she looked older. The wrinkles around her eyes told stories of sleepless nights, of worries that couldn't be put into words, of bills that always squeezed tight at the end of the month. Her hands were calloused, marked by years of hard labor, scrubbing floors, carrying heavy buckets, cleaning what no one else wanted to see. She was a woman of few words, with an attentive gaze and a heart too big for her own good. She lived alone in a simple shack in the community of Hopewell Gardens, a cluster of houses packed tightly against each other, where everyone knew everyone and secrets were impossible to keep. The walk to the bus stop took about 20 minutes on foot. Lords walked along the dirt road that cut through the neighborhood, passing shacks with clotheslines full of laundry, barefoot children running, skinny dogs barking without conviction. She greeted neighbors with a discreet nod, exchanged half a dozen words with Mrs. Eleanor, the woman who sold homemade bread on the corner, and walked on with her head down and her thoughts distant. That morning, however, something different caught her attention as she passed the vacant lot. Next to the disused landfill, Lords heard a strange noise. It was a muffled cry, interspersed with sobs that seemed to come from far away, as if someone was trying to hide their own suffering. She stopped, looked around, and frowned. It was unusual to hear children crying at that hour in that place. The lot was surrounded by a low, partially destroyed wall, covered in tall weeds and debris accumulated over the years. No one went there, except to dump rubbish or hide things they didn't want to be found. Lords hesitated. She was late, the bus wouldn't wait, and she couldn't miss work. But the crying continued, insistent, and something inside her couldn't ignore it. It was as if an invisible force pulled her into that lot. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and entered through the hole in the wall, stepping carefully between the rubble and pieces of glass scattered on the ground. The crying grew louder as she advanced, and then, between a pile of broken tiles and torn rubbish bags, Lords saw the girl. She was huddled, hugging her knees, her face dirty with earth and soot, her hair tangled, and full of dry leaves. She wore a dress that must have once been beautiful, but was now torn and covered in stains. Her feet were bare, scratched, and she was trembling, even though it wasn't cold. Lords felt her heart tighten. She approached slowly, knelt in front of the girl and carefully extended her hand like someone trying to calm a frightened animal. The girl lifted her face, and Lords saw her eyes, large, brown, full of fear. They were eyes that had seen too much for a child of that age. Lords estimated she couldn't be more than 5 years old. "It's all right, my dear," she said softly. "No one will hurt you. Are you lost? Where is your mother?" The girl didn't answer. She just kept looking at Lords with that frightened expression, her lips trembling, her hands clutching her dress as if it were the only thing keeping her together. Lords tried again, this time extending her arms. "Come here. Come with me. I'll help you, okay?" Slowly, very slowly, the girl allowed herself to be picked up. Lords wrapped her in her arms and felt the thin, trembling body snuggle against her chest. It was as if that child had been waiting for that for days. Lords held her tight, stroked her dirty hair and murmured words of comfort. It was all right now. She didn't know how, but she would find a way. She always did. It was then that she noticed the bracelet. It was thin, delicate, made of gold or some golden material that shone even under the dirt. It was on the girl's wrist, and on it was a name engraved in elegant letters. Lords cleaned the bracelet with her fingertip and read it. Belle. "Is your name Belle?" she asked softly. The girl didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. She just remained clinging to Lords as if afraid of being abandoned again. Lords looked around, searching for signs of someone, of some explanation. But the lot was empty, silent, and there was no one in sight. Who would leave a child like that? What had happened? 1,000 questions ran through her mind, but no answers came. What she knew, with absolute certainty, was that she couldn't leave that girl there. Without thinking twice, Lourdes stood up with the child in her arms and began walking back to the street. The girl was light, too light, and Lourdes felt a pang in her chest, realizing she had probably been without food for days. She couldn't take the girl home, not now. She needed care, food, medical attention, and Lourdes knew exactly where to go. The public hospital where she worked was a 20-minute bus ride away. Lourdes managed to catch the 6:15 bus, entered through the back door holding the girl against her chest, and settled into one of the back seats. Some passengers looked with curiosity, others with suspicion, but no one said anything. It was common to see women like Lourdes carrying children in the early hours. No one asked questions. During the journey, the girl remained quiet, just looking out the window with those large, empty eyes. Lourdes tried to talk to her a few times, asked if she was hungry, if she wanted water, if she remembered where she came from. But the girl just shook her head, or didn't answer at all. It was as if she was somewhere else, far away, lost within her own mind. When they arrived at the hospital, Lourdes got off the bus with the girl in her arms and entered through the main door. The lobby was full as always, people sitting on plastic benches, children crying, nurses rushing back and forth. Lourdes knew every corner of that place. She had worked there since she was 27, cleaning corridors, bathrooms, rooms. She was invisible to most people, but she knew everyone. She went directly to the reception, where Fernanda, one of the attendants, was typing something on the computer. Fernanda looked up, and her eyes widened when she saw Lourdes with a dirty, ill-treated child in her arms. "Lourdes, what happened?" she asked, getting up from her chair. "I found her abandoned in a vacant lot," Lourdes explained quickly. "She's alone with no one. She needs help. Someone has to be called." Fernanda looked at the girl, then at Lourdes, and then picked up the phone. In a few minutes, a nurse appeared, followed by a pediatric doctor. They took the girl to an emergency room, and Lourdes was instructed to wait outside. But she couldn't stand still. She stayed there, pacing back and forth in the corridor, biting her lip, feeling her heart pound erratically. After almost an hour, the doctor came out of the room. It was Dr. Marcia, a middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in a bun, a serious but kind gaze. She approached Lourdes and spoke in a low voice. "The girl is malnourished, dehydrated, but has no serious injuries. She's in a state of shock, which is why she's not talking much. We'll keep her under observation. Do you know her? Do you know where she came from?" Lourdes shook her head. "No, doctor. I found her like this, in the lot near Hopewell Gardens. There was no one around. She only had this." Lourdes showed the bracelet that was still on, the girl's wrist. "It has the name Bell engraved." Dr. Marcia looked at the bracelet, then at Lourdes. "We'll contact Child Welfare Services and Social Assistance. Someone must be looking for her. In the meantime, can you stay with her? She seems to trust you." Lourdes nodded without hesitation. "Of course, I'll stay." And so began a journey she would never have imagined. Lourdes spent the rest of the day in the hospital, no longer cleaning corridors, but sitting beside the bed where the girl slept. The child was clean now, dressed in a hospital gown, her hair brushed and tied in a ponytail. She looked so small, so fragile, lying in that bed that was too big for her. Lourdes watched every movement, every tremor, every sigh, and something awakened within her, something that had been dormant for years. It was a maternal instinct she thought she had lost, or perhaps had never had the chance to fully live. Lourdes had a daughter once, Anna Clara. She was born when Lourdes was only 19, in a complicated birth that almost took both of them. But Anna Clara was strong, a fighter. She grew up fast, smart, full of life. Lourdes worked day and night to give her daughter the best, so she could study, have new clothes, not go through the same hardships. But when Anna Clara was 10, she fell ill. It was an unexpected illness that came suddenly and took the girl in a few months. Lourdes never fully recovered. She continued working, continued living, but it was as if a part of her had been torn away and never returned. Looking at that girl, at Belle was like looking at a ghost from the past, and at the same time it was like getting a second chance. Lourdes didn't understand why she felt that, but she did, and she wasn't going to abandon that child. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set and the hospital grew quieter, the girl woke up. She opened her eyes slowly, looked around, startled, but seeing Lourdes sitting beside the bed, she relaxed a little. Lourdes smiled and took the girl's small, cold hand. "Hi, my dear, how are you feeling?" The girl blinked a few times, then whispered in a weak voice, "Auntie." Lourdes felt her eyes sting. "That's right, I'm Auntie Lourdes. I'm here with you, okay? I won't leave you alone." The girl squeezed Lourdes's hand and closed her eyes again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief, and Lourdes knew, at that moment, that she had made the right choice. In the following days, the story of the girl found in the landfill began to circulate through the hospital. Nurses commented, doctors asked questions, and soon social services appeared to investigate the case. Lourdes told everything she knew, which was very little. Child Welfare Services was contacted, and they began searching missing children records. It was on the second day that everything changed. Lourdes was in the cafeteria, having a quick coffee before returning to the room where Belle was, when Fernanda, the reception attendant, appeared running, holding her cell phone. "Lourdes, you need to see this," she said, breathless. "I think I found out who the girl is." Lourdes frowned and took the phone. On the screen, there was an old news report from months ago. The headline read in bold letters, "Businessman's daughter disappears in Manchester. Police investigate kidnapping." And right below there was a photo. It was a photo of a smiling girl with neatly combed hair, a pink dress holding a teddy bear, and that girl's face was identical to Belle's face. Lourdes felt the ground give way beneath her feet. She read the name in the report. Isabella Wellington, daughter of Augustus Wellington, a construction magnate, one of the wealthiest men in Manchester. The girl had disappeared 3 months ago under mysterious circumstances, and since then there had been no leads. The family was offering a reward of £1 million for information. Lourdes looked at Fernanda, then at the phone, then back at Fernanda. "It can't be," she murmured. "A child from a rich family abandoned in a landfill, that doesn't make sense." "But it does, Lourdes. Look at the photo. It's her, I'm sure." And she was sure. The more Lourdes looked at the photo, the more she saw the similarities. The eyes, the shape of the face, even the bracelet with the name Belle, which was probably a loving nickname. Everything matched. But how? And why? Fernanda called the hospital administration, and in less than an hour, the police were there. They asked questions, took photos, examined the girl, and then they confirmed it was Isabella Wellington. The child that the whole country had been looking for 3 months was there, in that public hospital in Manchester, under the care of a cleaner. The news spread like wildfire. Journalists began to arrive, cameras were installed outside the hospital, and the story of Lourdes, the woman who found Isabella in the rubbish, became a national headline. But Lourdes didn't want the spotlight. She didn't want to be called a hero. All she wanted was to understand what had happened to that girl, and why, deep down in her heart, she felt that something was very, very wrong. In the late afternoon, a motorcade of black cars arrived at the hospital. Security guards got out first, then lawyers in suits, and finally a tall man with grey hair, a serious face, and tired eyes. Augustus Wellington, Isabella's father. He entered the hospital like someone entering a battlefield. Lourdes saw him from afar, surrounded by people, talking to doctors, to the police. But when they finally took him to the room where Isabella was, Lourdes couldn't leave. She stood in the corridor, watching through the glass window. Augustus entered the room, stopped in front of the bed where the girl slept, and stood there. For long seconds he didn't approach, he didn't touch her, he just looked as if trying to decide if it was real. And then he turned and left without saying a word. Lourdes frowned. That was not the reaction of a father who had just reunited with his missing daughter. That was the reaction of someone who was scared, or perhaps guilty. And it was at that moment that Lords understood. This story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and she, a simple cleaner whom no one noticed, was about to uncover secrets that many powerful people preferred to keep buried forever. Night fell over Manchester, and Lords remained in the hospital, sitting beside Isabella's bed, holding the girl's small, cold hand. Outside, the whole world talked about the miracle of the reunion, but inside, in that silent room, Lords knew that the true mystery still needed to be unraveled, and she wouldn't rest until she discovered the truth. The next morning arrived with a commotion Lords had never seen in the hospital. Reporters surrounded the main entrance, cameras pointed in all directions, journalists trying to extract statements from anyone entering or leaving. Inside the building, the movement was even greater. The administration had isolated the pediatric ward, placed security guards in all corridors, and restricted access to the room where Isabella was. Lords was only able to remain there because the girl herself refused to let go of her hand, and the doctors understood that separating them could cause even more trauma to the child. Lords didn't sleep that night. She stayed there, sitting in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, watching Isabella sleep. The girl had nightmares. She woke up startled, sweating, murmuring disconnected words that Lords tried to decipher. Dark, locked door, can't, go out, car noise, she's coming back. The phrases didn't make sense separately, but Lords knew that together they told a story that no one yet had the courage to hear in full. When the sun rose and the morning light flooded the room through the thin curtains, Isabella woke up. She slowly opened her eyes, looked at Lords, and for the first time showed something like a smile. It was shy, fragile, but it was there. Lords felt her heart tighten with emotion. "Good morning, my dear," she said, stroking the girl's hair. "Did you sleep well?" Isabella nodded, but her face quickly closed up. She looked around as if searching for something or someone. Lords noticed the fear returning to her eyes. "It's all right," Lords continued, trying to calm her. "You are safe here. No one will hurt you." But the words didn't seem to have much effect. Isabella remained tense, clutching the sheet, her eyes fixed on the room door. And then the door opened. First a security guard entered, then a man in an impeccable suit, and finally Augustus Wellington. He was more composed than the night before, but there was still something in his gaze that Lords couldn't decipher. It was a mixture of relief and discomfort, as if he didn't quite know how to act in that situation. "Good morning," he said, his voice firm but restrained. "I came to see my daughter." Lords rose from the chair, making space, but Isabella clutched her hand tightly. The girl didn't look at her father. She kept her eyes fixed on Lords, as if begging her not to leave. Augustus noticed and stopped halfway, a few feet from the bed. "Isabella," he called, his voice softer now. "Daddy's here, my love. Are you well?" The girl didn't respond. She just squeezed Lords's hand even tighter. The silence in the room was heavy, uncomfortable. The man in the suit, whom Lords imagined to be a lawyer, coughed discreetly and tried to break the ice. "Mr. Wellington would like to speak with the young lady who found Isabella. Could you accompany us for a few minutes?" Lords looked at Isabella, hesitant. She didn't want to leave the girl, but she also didn't want to cause trouble. She knew that to those people she was just a hospital employee, someone from a lower social class without a voice or power. But Isabella wouldn't let her go. She held her hand so tightly that Lords felt the small nails dig into her skin. "She doesn't want me to leave," Lords said, trying to keep her voice firm. Augustus looked at his daughter, then at Lords, and sighed. "Then stay. But I need to speak with you later." He tried a few more times to approach his daughter, but each time Isabella reacted the same way. She cowered, clung to Lords, averted her gaze. It was as if she was afraid of her own father, and that left Lords deeply uneasy. A father who finally reunites with his missing daughter should be met with joy, with relief. But that was not what she was seeing. After almost half an hour of frustrated attempts, Augustus gave up. He left the room visibly shaken, followed by the lawyer and the security guard. Lords stayed there, trying to calm Isabella, who was now crying softly, her face hidden in the pillow. It was then that the door opened again. This time, a woman entered. She was young, probably around 30, with straight blonde hair down to her shoulders, impeccable makeup, designer clothes. She wore a simple white dress, but it probably cost more than Lords earned in 6 months. There was something studied in that simplicity, as if she had chosen every detail to convey a specific image. The image of the loving, worried, suffering fiancé, Bianca Sterling. Lords recognized her from the news reports she had seen. She was Augustus's fiancée, a famous digital influencer with millions of followers on social media. A woman who lived to appear, to sell a perfect life full of luxury, travel, and rehearsed smiles. "Hi, my love," Bianca said, her voice sweet as honey, approaching the bed. "Auntie Bianca is here. Are you well?" Isabella lifted her face from the pillow and looked at Bianca. And then something happened that Lords would never forget. The girl began to tremble. It wasn't the tremor of cold, nor of tiredness. It was the tremor of pure terror. Her eyes widened. She let go of Lords's hand and cowered in the corner of the bed, hugging her knees, her breathing rapid. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, no, no." Bianca stopped, surprised, but quickly recomposed her expression. "My love, it's all right. You don't need to be afraid. I'm here to help you." But Isabella kept repeating, "No, no, no." And then she screamed in a desperate tone that made Lords jump up. "Go away!" A nurse rushed into the room, alerted by the scream. Bianca backed away, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender, but the expression on her face was one of frustration, not concern. Lords picked Isabella up, trying to calm her, rocking her gently and murmuring words of comfort. The girl clung to her, sobbing, her whole body trembling. "I think you'd better leave," the nurse said to Bianca in a firm, but polite tone. Bianca cast one last glance at Isabella, then at Lords, and left the room without saying anything else. But before closing the door, she turned and her eyes met Lords's. It was only a second, but in that second, Lords saw something that chilled her. It wasn't sadness nor compassion. It was something cold, calculating. It was the look of someone losing control of a situation and not liking it at all. After Bianca left, it took Isabella almost an hour to calm down. Lords held her the whole time, softly singing lullabies she used to sing, to her own daughter, Anna Clara, years ago. Gradually the girl relaxed, her sobs subsiding until she finally fell asleep, exhausted. Lords laid her back in bed, covered her carefully, and stayed there, watching. Her mind buzzed with questions. Why had Isabella reacted that way to seeing Bianca? Why did her father seem so distant? What had happened in the 3 months the girl had been missing? And most importantly, why did Lords feel deep down in her heart that this whole story was wrong? Later, Lords was called to speak with Augustus Wellington. They met in a private room, away from curious eyes. Augustus was sitting in a leather chair, his hands clasped, his face marked by sleepless nights. Beside him was the lawyer, a middle-aged man with slicked back hair and a serious expression. "Mrs. Lords," the lawyer began, "Mr. Wellington would like to personally thank you for finding Isabella. The family is deeply grateful." Lords nodded, but said nothing. She was waiting for what would come next. "We would like to offer financial compensation for your help," the lawyer continued, "a generous sum as a token of gratitude." Lords looked at Augustus, who kept his eyes fixed on his own hands. "I don't want money," she said, her voice firm. "I just want to know that she'll be all right." The lawyer seemed surprised. "Of course she'll be all right. She's with her family now." "Is she?" Lords questioned, and there was something in her voice that made Augustus finally look up. "Because that's not what I saw in the room. She doesn't seem comfortable near you, and when your fiancé came in, she was terrified." Augustus swallowed hard. "Isabella has been through trauma. It's normal for her to be confused, scared. In time, she will recover." Lords stared at him. "Do you know what happened to her?" The question hung in the air, heavy. Augustus averted his gaze. "We are investigating. The police are working on the case. But do you have any idea? Lords insisted. The lawyer intervened. Mrs. Lords, we understand your concern, but these are matters that should be handled with the competent authorities. The family appreciates your help, but now it's time to let us take care of Isabella. Lords felt a lump in her throat. She knew she was being dismissed, that they wanted her to go back to her place, to her duties, as a cleaner, and forget all about it. But she couldn't. Not after holding that girl in her arms, after seeing the fear in her eyes, after feeling the small hand clinging to hers so tightly. Isabella needs someone she trusts, Lord said, rising from her chair. And right now that person is me. So with all due respect, I'm not going anywhere as long as she needs me. And she left the room before they could answer. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled. Lords had never been one to confront anyone, much less rich and powerful people. But there was something about that story that moved her in a way she couldn't explain. It was as if fate had placed Isabella in her path for a reason, and she was going to find out what it was. In the following days, Lords' presence beside Isabella became constant. She practically lived in the hospital, sleeping in the chair, eating what the nurses brought, never leaving the girl's side. Gradually, Isabella began to speak more, not about what had happened, but about small, everyday things. She said she liked to draw, that she was afraid of the dark, that she missed a teddy bear named Pippo. Lords listened carefully, mentally noting every detail, and she also observed. She observed Augustus's visits, always brief, always uncomfortable. She observed that Bianca didn't return, but her assistant appeared once, bringing flowers and a giant teddy bear that Isabella refused. She observed the security guards who stayed outside the room, the lawyers who appeared with documents, the whispered conversations in the corridors. And she also observed the other people who worked at the hospital. That's how she met Mariana, a young nurse with curly hair and an easy smile who worked in the pediatric ward. Mariana liked to talk, and during one of their coffee breaks while Isabella slept, she struck up a conversation with Lourdes. "Did you see the news?" she asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. "They're saying it was a kidnapping, that someone took the girl and asked for a ransom." Lourdes frowned. "And did they pay?" Mariana shrugged. "I don't know. But the strange thing is that no ransom demand was ever disclosed, and the police never found any leads. It was as if the girl had vanished into thin air. And now she appears in a landfill," Lourdes completed thoughtfully. "Exactly." Mariana leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Don't you think it's strange? I mean, if it was a kidnapping, why would they leave her there? If they wanted money, why didn't they return her directly to the family after receiving the ransom?" Lourdes had no answer, but she agreed that there was something very strange about the whole story. "And there's more," Mariana continued, almost whispering now. "I heard one of the social workers comment that the police are investigating people close to the family. They said that in cases like this, usually the culprit is closer than we imagine." Mariana's words echoed in Lourdes' mind for the rest of the day. People close to the family. She thought of Augustus, of the distant way he treated his daughter. She thought of Bianca, of Isabella's terrified reaction to seeing her, and she thought of the words the girl murmured during her nightmares. "She's coming back." Who was she? That night, Lourdes couldn't sleep. She sat beside Isabella's bed, watching the girl sleep, and her mind wouldn't stop working. There were missing pieces in that puzzle, and she was determined to find them. It was then that Isabella woke up, startled, as always. But this time, instead of just crying, she looked at Lourdes and whispered something that chilled the woman's blood. "Auntie Lourdes," she said, her voice trembling, "I remember." "Remember what, my love?" "I remember where I was. It was a house. It had a dark room, and she stayed there with me." "Who, Isabella? Who stayed with you?" The girl hesitated, her eyes full of tears. "The pretty lady. The one who came here." Lourdes felt her heart race. "Bianca?" Isabella nodded slowly. "She said it was a secret, that I couldn't tell anyone, that if I told, bad things would happen." Lourdes held the girl's hands, trying to keep her voice calm despite the whirlwind of emotions. "You're safe now, my love. You can tell me. What else do you remember?" Isabella closed her eyes, as if trying to pull memories from a deep, dark place. There was a man, too. He was nice. He brought food. But she ordered him around. She ordered everything. Do you know the man's name? Isabella shook her head. But she called him Caleb. Lourdes felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Caleb. She had heard that name before. She tried to remember where, when. And then the memory came. In one of the news reports she had read about Isabella's disappearance, there was a mention of Caleb Meadows, Bianca Sterling's personal assistant, the man who was always by her side at events, on trips, behind the scenes of the perfect life she sold on social media. Lourdes knew she had just discovered something important, something that changed everything. But she also knew she needed to be careful. If Bianca and Caleb were involved in Isabella's disappearance, then they were dangerous people, and she, a simple cleaner, was about to enter a game much bigger than she imagined. But she couldn't turn back, not after hearing that, not after seeing the fear in Isabella's eyes. The truth needed to come out, and Lourdes, even without knowing how, was determined to make it happen. As the night advanced and Manchester slept outside, Lourdes remained awake, holding Isabella's hand, planning her next steps. She wasn't a detective, she wasn't a lawyer, she wasn't anyone important, but she was someone who knew how to see beyond appearances, and sometimes that was all that was needed to unravel the darkest secrets. The days that followed were a mix of tension and silent discoveries. Lourdes maintained her routine at the hospital, but now with a purpose that went far beyond cleaning corridors and emptying bins. Every conversation she overheard, every document she glimpsed, every suspicious movement she noticed, everything was stored in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she was determined to assemble. Isabella continued to progress, little by little. She spoke more, smiled occasionally, accepted the food the nurses brought, but always by Lourdes's side. When the cleaner had to leave, even for a few minutes the girl panicked. She cried, called, for her, refused to be alone. The doctors said it was understandable, given the trauma she had suffered, but Lourdes knew it was more than that. Isabella was afraid of being taken again, afraid of returning to that dark place she mentioned in her nightmares. One afternoon, while cleaning the bathroom of one of the empty rooms, Lourdes overheard voices in the corridor. She recognized one of them immediately. It was Augustus Wellington. He was talking to someone in a low tone, but the irritation in his voice was clear. Lourdes approached the door, pretending to arrange the cleaning products, and strained her ears. "I can't stand this situation anymore," Augustus was saying. "Isabella doesn't want to be near me. She doesn't want to go home. The doctors say she needs time, but how much time? And the journalists keep asking questions. They want details I don't have." The other voice, masculine, responded calmly. "Mr. Wellington, we need to keep the narrative under control. The police are investigating, but so far there's no concrete evidence of anything. The important thing is to protect the family's image and ensure Isabella recovers." "Protect the image," Augustus repeated bitterly. "It's always about that, isn't it? Never about what really matters." There was a heavy silence. Lourdes held her breath, trying not to make a sound. "And Bianca?" Augustus asked, his voice lower now. "Is she handling all this well?" The other voice hesitated before answering. "She's worried. About the repercussions, about what people are saying. Some theories on social media are starting to point in her direction." Augustus let out a long sigh. "I know, I saw, and maybe they're right." The words hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Lourdes felt her heart race. What did he mean by that? Did Augustus suspect Bianca? Or worse, did he know something and was hiding it? Footsteps moved away down the corridor before Lourdes could hear anything else. She stood there, still, processing what she had just heard. Augustus was conflicted, that was clear. There was something in him that wanted to believe in Bianca, but there was also doubt, and that doubt was the opening Lourdes needed. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Lourdes took advantage of the hospital being emptier and decided to do something risky. She knew that the Wellington family's security guards stayed in one of the reserved rooms on the upper floor, and that they usually left folders and documents on the table when they went out on patrol. It was a small chance, but she had to try. She went up the service stairs, her heart pounding, her hands sweating. The upper floor corridor was empty, lit only by emergency lights. Lourdes walked slowly, trying not to make noise, until she reached the room door. It was ajar. She peeked through the gap and saw that no one was inside. On the table, there were some folders and an open laptop. Lourdes looked around, took a deep breath and entered. Her hands trembled as she opened the first folder. Inside there were official documents, copies of police reports, police records. She quickly flipped through them, trying to absorb as much information as possible. There were mentions of investigations into the disappearance, interrogations with employees of the Wellington mansion, analyses of security cameras. And then, in the middle of the papers, Lourdes found something that made her stomach churn. It was a transcript of an intercepted conversation. The date was 2 days before Isabella's disappearance. The voices identified were Bianca Sterling and Caleb Meadows. Lourdes read, carefully, her hands trembling. Bianca, I can't stand this situation anymore. That child is an obstacle. As long as she's here, he'll never give me the attention I deserve. Caleb, you need to be patient. These things take time. Bianca, time is what I don't have, Caleb. If I don't act soon, I'll lose everything. The wedding, the money, the position. I need her out of the way. Caleb, and what are you suggesting? Bianca, you know what I'm suggesting. We've talked about this before. Caleb, Bianca, this is dangerous. If anyone finds out... Bianca, no one will find out. You just need to do what I told you, and then everything goes back to normal. The transcript ended there. Lourdes felt her legs weaken. That was proof. Proof that Bianca had planned something against Isabella. She didn't know exactly what, but it was clear that the girl's disappearance was not an accident. It was something calculated, premeditated, and Caleb was involved. Lourdes took her cell phone from her pocket and photographed the transcript, her hands trembling so much she almost dropped the device. Then she put everything back in place exactly as it was and left the room, as quickly as she could. She went down the service stairs with her heart racing, feeling as if she was being chased, although she knew she was alone. When she got back to Isabella's room, she locked herself in the bathroom and stayed there for a few minutes, trying to catch her breath. She looked at the photo on her phone, at those words that confirmed her suspicions. Now she had something concrete. But what to do with it? Who to give it to? And more importantly, how to protect Isabella? The next morning, Lourdes woke up with a sense of urgency. She knew she needed to act fast, but she also needed to be smart. If she handed that transcript to the police, she could be accused of invasion of privacy, of stealing documents, and worse, Bianca and Caleb could discover that she knew something and take action. Lourdes had no illusions about the power people like them had. They could destroy her in the blink of an eye. While she was thinking about what to do, an unexpected visitor arrived at Isabella's room. It was a woman of about 50, with short grey hair, simple but well-kept clothes. She introduced herself as Helena, the housekeeper of the Wellington mansion. She said she had come to bring some of Isabella's clothes and toys, things the girl liked, and that might help her feel better. Lourdes observed the woman carefully. There was something genuine about her, a true concern that didn't seem feigned. After Helena delivered the items and was preparing to leave, Lourdes called her. "Can I speak with you for a minute?" Helena stopped and looked at Lourdes with curiosity. Of course. They went out into the corridor, away from curious ears. Lourdes hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "How long have you worked at the Wellington house?" "More than 20 years, Helena replied with a touch of pride in her voice. "I saw Isabella born. I took care of her since she was a baby." "So you know the family well?" "I do." Helena crossed her arms, her gaze becoming more cautious. "Why are you asking?" Lourdes took a deep breath. "Because I think Isabella didn't disappear by accident. And I think you think the same." Helena was silent for a long moment, studying Lourdes' face. Then slowly she nodded. "I think so too. I always felt there was something wrong with that story. But I have no proof, and even if I did, who would listen to me? I'm just a maid." Lourdes felt an immediate connection with that woman. They were two invisible people working in the shadows, but seeing things that the powerful preferred to ignore. "I have something," Lord said, lowering her voice. "Something that can prove Bianca Sterling was involved in Isabella's disappearance." Helena's eyes widened. "Seriously? What?" Lord showed her the photo of the transcript on her phone. Helena read it carefully, and as she progressed, her face grew paler and paler. When she finished, she looked at Lords with a mixture of fear and determination. "This is serious," she said. "If this conversation is real, Bianca could be in big trouble. But you need to be careful. She has many resources, many lawyers, and she won't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens her position." "I know," Lords replied, "but I can't stay quiet. Isabella deserves justice. She deserves to know the truth." Helena sighed. "Then you'll need help, and I'll help you, because I also can't stand to see that woman pretending to care when all she wants is the Wellington, family's money and status." The two women looked at each other, and at that moment they formed an unlikely but powerful alliance. They had no power, no influence, but they had something Bianca didn't expect. They had the truth. In the following days, Lords and Helena worked together, exchanging information, building a more complete picture of what had happened. Helena revealed that, in the days leading up to Isabella's disappearance, Bianca had acted strangely. She went out alone at night, made secret calls, became nervous whenever someone asked where she was going. And Caleb, the assistant, was also always around, more than usual. Helena also said that after Isabella disappeared, Bianca was publicly devastated, but at home, when she thought no one was looking, she seemed relieved, almost calm, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Meanwhile, Isabella continued to recover. She spoke more about the time she was missing, always in fragments, always at unexpected moments. She said she was locked in a dark room, that Bianca visited her occasionally, bringing food and saying that it was all a secret, that she couldn't tell anyone. She said Caleb was kinder, that he tried to play with her, but that Bianca always told him to leave. And she said that on the last day Bianca said she was going to take her to a place where her father could find her. But before that, she needed to be alone for a while. Lords listened to every word, every detail, and put the pieces together. Now she understood. Bianca had not kidnapped Isabella for money. She had hidden the girl to unbalance Augustus, to make him emotionally dependent on her, Bianca, during that difficult period. It was a cruel psychological manipulation, calculated to strengthen the bond between them. And when she finally returned Isabella, or when the girl was found, Bianca would be the heroine who helped Augustus overcome the loss, and he would become even more attached to her. But something went wrong. Isabella was found earlier than expected, and now Bianca was losing control of the narrative. One afternoon, while Lords was organizing Isabella's clothes, the room door opened abruptly. It was Bianca. She entered unannounced, without knocking, with an expression Lords had never seen before. It wasn't the mask of perfection she always wore, it was pure rage. "We need to talk," Bianca said, looking directly at Lords. Isabella, who was lying on the bed drawing, froze. Lords immediately placed herself between the girl and Bianca, her protective instinct overriding everything else. "About what?" Lords asked, keeping her voice firm. "About you. About your obsession with staying close to my future stepdaughter. You are nobody. You are just a cleaner, and you are overstepping your bounds." Lords felt anger swell within her, but she controlled herself. "Isabella needs me. She's the one who wants me to stay. Isabella is a traumatized child. She doesn't know what she wants, and you are taking advantage of that." "Taking advantage?" Lords took a step forward, her eyes fixed on Bianca's. "I am taking care of her, something you apparently never did." Bianca narrowed her eyes. "Be careful what you say." "Or what? Are you going to do what you did to her? Are you going to hide me somewhere too?" The words came out before Lords could control herself, and as soon as they did, she knew she had made a mistake. Bianca turned pale, then red. Her eyes gleamed with dangerous fury. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice low and threatening. I know more than you imagine." Bianca took a step forward, invading Lords's personal space. "If you spread any lies about me, I will destroy you. I will make you lose your job, your home, everything. You will regret ever crossing my path." Lords did not back down. "I'm not the one who will regret it." The two women stood there, staring at each other, the tension palpable in the air. It was Isabella who broke the silence, with a shrill scream. "Go away!" She wasn't crying, she wasn't trembling, she was furious. "Go away and don't come back." Bianca looked at Isabella, and for a moment Lord saw something in her face that looked like regret. But it was just a flicker. She turned and left the room, slamming the door shut. Lords knelt beside the bed and hugged Isabella, who was now indeed starting to cry. "It's all right, my love, she won't take you again, I promise." But Lords knew she had just started a war, and in wars against powerful people, the one with the truth on their side doesn't always win. Sometimes the one with more resources, more influence, more ability to manipulate the narrative wins. But Lords wasn't going to give up. Not now, not after everything. She had Isabella to protect, she had the truth to reveal. And she had Helena by her side, another woman who saw beyond appearances. Together, they would find a way. Because the truth, however buried it might be, always had a way of coming to light. And when it did, Bianca Sterling would have to answer for everything she had done. Night fell over Manchester, bringing with it a fine rain that covered the city like a transparent veil. Lords was sitting in the chair beside Isabella's bed, watching the girl sleep when her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Helena. "We need to meet. Tomorrow, 7 in the morning, in the square in front of the hospital. It's urgent." Lords replied quickly, confirming. She put her phone away and looked back at Isabella. The girl was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days without apparent nightmares. Lords gently stroked her hair and wondered how long she could protect her. After the confrontation with Bianca, she knew she was treading on dangerous ground, but there was no turning back. There couldn't be. The next morning, Lords woke up early, asked Mariana, the trusted nurse, to stay with Isabella for a few minutes, and went down to meet Helena. The square was empty, still wet from the previous night's rain. Helena was already there, sitting on one of the benches, holding a black folder against her chest. "Good morning," Lords greeted, sitting beside her. Helena looked around, as if checking if no one was watching, and then handed the folder to Lords. "I found this last night. It was in Augustus's office in a locked drawer. I had to get the spare key he keeps. In the library." Lords opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents, contracts, bank statements. She quickly flipped through them, trying to understand what she was seeing, and then she stopped at a specific page. It was a marriage contract, signed between Augustus Wellington and Bianca Sterling. But it wasn't a common contract. There were specific clauses about inheritance, assets, and rights in case of unexpected events. And in the middle of it all, there was a clause that made Lords' stomach churn. In case of the death or permanent disappearance of the minor Isabella Wellington, party Bianca Sterling shall be entitled to 50% of the estate's assets, including properties, investments, and commercial rights, upon proof of an effective bond established during the period of cohabitation prior to the event. Lords read and reread that clause 3 times. It was surreal, diabolical. Bianca had made Augustus sign a contract that basically made her a direct beneficiary if something happened to Isabella. And he had signed it. Either he didn't know what he was signing, blinded by love and manipulation, or he was so devastated by the loss of his daughter that he didn't pay attention to the details. "This is a confession," Lords whispered, looking at Helena. "This proves she had motives." Helena nodded, her face serious. She planned everything from the beginning. Isabella's disappearance wasn't to ask for ransom, nor to harm her. It was to create a situation where, if the girl was never found, Bianca would become rich and powerful, and at the same time, she would become the woman who comforted Augustus during the most difficult moment of his life. "And Caleb?" Lords asked. "How does he fit into this?" Helena sighed. "Caleb is in love with Bianca, always has been. He does everything. She tells him without question. If she said to hide Isabella, he hid her. If she said to bring the girl back, he brought her. He's a puppet in her hands." Lords closed the folder and held it tightly. "We need to take this to the police. It's enough proof." "It's not," Helena said, shaking her head. "It's circumstantial. Bianca's lawyers will argue that the contract is just a common precaution in wealthy people's marriages, and that the clause about Isabella was included at Augustus's own suggestion to protect Bianca if something happened. They'll turn everything against us." "So what? Do? We need something more concrete, something that directly links Bianca to the disappearance. A confession, a witness, something that cannot be contested." The two women fell silent, thinking. And then, Lords had an idea. "What if we can make her confess?" Helena looked at her skeptically. "How?" "Isabella. She's the key. Bianca is losing control because Isabella remembers what happened, and more importantly, because Isabella is afraid of her. If we can make Bianca think the girl has already told everything, that she has already spoken to the authorities, maybe she'll panic and make a mistake." "It's risky," Helena said. "If Bianca feels cornered, we don't know what she might do." "I know, but we don't have many options, and time is running out. Soon they'll take Isabella out of the hospital and back to the mansion, and once she's there, it will be much harder to protect her." Helena thought for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll try, but we need to be careful, and we need to have someone on our side who can protect us." Lords knew exactly who she was talking about. Augustus. They needed to make Augustus see the truth about Bianca. But how to convince a man in love, manipulated, that the woman he loves is capable of something so horrible? That afternoon, Lords had the opportunity she was waiting for. Augustus appeared at the hospital, as he did every day, to visit Isabella. But this time he was alone. No lawyers, no security guards, no Bianca. Lords approached him in the corridor before he entered the room. "Mr. Wellington, I need to speak with you. It's important." Augustus stopped and looked at her with weariness. "Mrs. Lords, we've already spoken. I appreciate your help, but—" "It's about Isabella," Lords interrupted, "and about who is truly responsible for her disappearance." Augustus tensed. "The police are investigating. It's not your concern. It should be the concern of anyone who cares about that girl." Lords took a step forward, her voice firm. "And I care, Mr. Wellington, more than many people who should care." Augustus opened his mouth to reply, but Lords didn't let him. "Isabella is afraid of Bianca. You saw it. She panics every time your fiancé appears. And it's not because she's traumatized, it's because she remembers. Remembers who held her captive, who lied to her, who manipulated all this." "Are you accusing Bianca?" Augustus asked, his voice low but dangerous. "I'm telling the truth. And deep down, you know it. That's why you hesitate when you're near Isabella. That's why you avoid her gaze. Because you also feel that something is wrong." The words hit Augustus like arrows. He averted his gaze, and Lords saw the doubt, the guilt, the fear. She saw a man torn between love and reason, between what he wanted to believe and what he knew to be true. "I have no proof," he murmured. "I have nothing to confirm this." "Then look." Lords took her phone from her pocket and showed him the photo of the transcript. "This is a conversation between Bianca and Caleb 2 days before Isabella disappeared. Read it." Augustus took the phone, read the transcript, and as he progressed, his face grew paler and paler. When he finished, he handed the phone back to Lords without saying anything. He stood there still, as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Where did you get this?" he finally asked. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's real, and that your daughter is saying the same thing. Isabella remembers Bianca, remembers being held in a dark room, remembers the lies she heard, and you need to protect her before it's too late." Augustus ran a hand over his face. His shoulders slumped, as if carrying the weight of the world. "I trusted her. I loved her. How could I have been so blind?" "You weren't blind," Lord said, more gently now. "She was just very good at deceiving, but now you know the truth, and you need to decide what you're going to do with it." Augustus looked at the door of the room where Isabella was. "I need to talk to my daughter. I need to hear from her what happened. Then go, but go as a father, not as someone looking for excuses. Isabella needs to know she can trust you. Augustus nodded and entered the room. Lourdes stayed outside, watching through the window. She saw Augustus approach the bed, kneel beside it, take Isabella's small hand. She saw the girl wake up, startled at first, but then relax upon seeing her father. And for the first time, she saw Augustus truly hug his daughter without hesitation, without distance. She saw tears stream down his face as he whispered apologies, as he promised he would protect her, that he would never let anything bad happen again. And Isabella, for the first time since she was found, cried in her father's arms, not from fear, but from relief, because finally, he was there, for real. When Augustus left the room, almost an hour later, his face was transformed. He was no longer the conflicted, hesitant man. He was a determined father, a man who had just woken up to reality and was ready to act. "Thank you," he said to Lourdes. "Thank you for not giving up, for seeing what I should have seen from the beginning. What are you going to do now?" "I'm going to talk to the police. I'm going to hand over everything I have, and I'm going to make sure Bianca pays for what she did." Lourdes nodded. "And Isabella? Will she be safe?" "I'm taking her out of here today. I'm taking her to a place where Bianca can't reach her, and I'm hiring protection. Nothing will happen to my daughter. Never again." And so events began to unfold rapidly. Augustus called the police, handed over all the documents Lourdes and Helena had found, and gave his own testimony. The stalled investigation gained new momentum. Caleb was summoned for questioning and, under pressure, eventually confessed. He told everything. How Bianca convinced him to kidnap Isabella, to keep her hidden in a rented apartment under a false name, to feed the girl stories that her father no longer cared about her, that it was better to stay there, quietly, until everything passed. He said Bianca visited Isabella regularly, not out of affection, but to ensure the girl didn't cause problems, and he said that, when he realized the pressure was getting too great, when journalists started investigating, when the police started asking difficult questions, Bianca ordered him to leave Isabella somewhere she could be found, but not back to the family, in a public place, where it would look like an accident, where no one could trace it back to them. Caleb took Isabella to the vacant lot near the community where Lourdes lived, left the girl there, and fled. He never imagined that a simple cleaner would find her so quickly. He never imagined that that woman would be the piece that would bring down the entire castle of lies Bianca had built. When the police went to the mansion to arrest Bianca, she wasn't there. She had fled as soon as she knew Caleb was being questioned. But she didn't go far. She was found at the airport, trying to board an international flight with false documents. When the police approached her, she tried to maintain her composure, her mask of perfection, but this time, it didn't work. Cameras were there, recording everything. The whole country watched as the influencer who sold a perfect life was handcuffed and taken to the police station. In the days that followed, the story dominated all the news. Bianca's lawyers tried to argue that she was Caleb's victim, that she had been manipulated, deceived. But the evidence was too strong. The transcript of the conversation, the contract with the suspicious clause, Caleb's testimony, Isabella's own words. Everything pointed to her as the mastermind behind it all. The trial would come months later, but everyone knew Bianca wouldn't escape. And while she awaited in prison, Isabella began to rebuild her life. She returned to the mansion, but now with her father by her side, protecting her, truly loving her. Helena continued working there, now, not just as a housekeeper, but as someone the family completely trusted. And Lourdes returned to her routine. She continued to be a cleaner at the hospital, continued to live in the simple shack in the community of Hopewell Gardens. But now it was different. Because she knew she had made a difference, she had saved a girl, she had revealed the truth, she had proven that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, how much money you have. What matters is the courage to do what is right, even when the whole world seems to be against you. Isabella visited Lourdes every week. Augustus took her personally, grateful, respectful, And every time Isabella ran into Lourdes' arms, every time she called her auntie, every time she smiled that way only children know how to smile when they are truly happy, Lourdes felt her heart fill with an emotion that couldn't be put into words. She had lost Anna Clara years ago. Nothing would ever fill that void. But somehow, taking care of Isabella, watching her grow, knowing that she was there for whatever the girl needed, was like getting a new chance. Not to replace what was lost, but to honor that memory. To use the pain of the past to do something good in the present. And while Manchester continued its routine, with its buildings, its avenues, its lives rushing back and forth, Lourdes Santana walked steadily, with her head held high, because she knew something many people forget, that heroes don't wear capes, they don't make headlines for long, they don't become rich or famous. Heroes are ordinary people who, when faced with a choice, decide to do what is right, even when it costs dearly, even when no one is looking, even when the world says they don't matter. Because in the end, everyone matters, and everyone can make a difference. You just need the courage to see beyond appearances and a heart big enough to act. 6 months had passed since the day Bianca Sterling was arrested at the airport. Manchester had changed little on the surface, with its busy streets, bustling commerce, and buildings that touched the sky. But for some people everything was different. What had happened in those preceding months left deep marks, scars that would never completely disappear, but which were slowly transforming into memories, into lessons, into strength. Lourdes woke up as she always did, at 5 in the morning, with the insistent alarm clock beside her bed. She rose, prepared her strong black coffee, put on her faded blue uniform that had been washed so many times it was almost white in places. But there was something different that morning, a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. Perhaps it was the fact that Isabella was well, or perhaps it was because she herself had learned that her life, however simple, had value. It had purpose. The journey to the hospital was the same as always. The dirt road, the shacks with clotheslines full of laundry, the barefoot children running, Mrs. Eleanor selling bread on the corner. Lourdes greeted neighbors with a nod, bought 2 fresh loaves to eat during her break, and walked on. But when she passed the vacant lot where she had found Isabella, she stopped for a moment. She looked at that place that used to cause a pang in her chest, and now brought a strange sense of gratitude. If she hadn't passed by there that morning, if she hadn't heard the girls crying, if she hadn't had the courage to go in and see what was happening, everything could have been different. Isabella might not be alive today, or worse, she might be trapped in a life of lies, manipulated by people who didn't care about her. Lourdes took a deep breath and continued walking. She caught the 6:15 bus, as always, and arrived at the hospital a few minutes later. As she entered the main corridor, she was greeted by the greetings of the nurses, doctors, and other staff. In recent months, Lourdes had become well known. She was no longer the invisible cleaner no one noticed. She was the woman who had saved Isabella Wellington, the hero the newspapers talked so much about. But Lourdes didn't like this attention. For her, she had done nothing extraordinary. She had merely done what any person with a heart should do. She had taken care of a child who needed help. During the morning, while cleaning the corridors of the pediatric ward, Lourdes was approached by Fernanda, the reception attendant. She held a white envelope in her hands and a smile on her face. "Lourdes, this arrived for you early today," she said, handing her the envelope. Lourdes wiped her hands on her apron and carefully took the envelope. It had no sender, just her name written by hand in elegant calligraphy. She opened it, and inside was a card. It was an invitation for Isabella's 6th birthday, which would be held next Saturday. The invitation was simple but beautiful, with drawings of flowers and butterflies, and at the end there was a handwritten message. "Auntie Lourdes, please come. It won't be the same without you. I love you, Isabella." Lourdes felt her eyes sting. She held the card against her chest and smiled. Of course she would. Go. She wouldn't miss that day for anything in the world. Saturday arrived sunny with a cloudless blue sky. Lourdes woke up earlier than usual, nervous and excited at the same time. She didn't have many nice clothes, but she chose her best dress, the navy blue one she only wore on special occasions, and took the bus to the affluent neighborhood where the Wellington mansion was located. It was a completely different world from hers. Huge houses, high walls, well-tended gardens, imported cars parked in garages. Lords felt out of place for a moment, but took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Helena opened the gate with a wide smile on her face. "Lords, so glad you came. Come in, come in." Lords entered and was greeted by a scene that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. The garden was decorated with colorful balloons, tables full of sweets and cakes, a swimming pool with inflatable toys, and several children running and playing. In the center of it all was Isabella, wearing a light pink dress, her hair tied back with a flower tiara, smiling from ear to ear. When she saw Lords, her eyes sparkled and she ran towards her, throwing herself into her arms. "Auntie Lords, you came!" Lords picked her up and spun her in the air, making the girl laugh. "Of course I came, my love. I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything." Isabella hugged her tightly, her face pressed against Lords's neck, and whispered, "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "Why would you think that?" "Because you always work so hard, and because I know it's different here from where you live." Lords gently pushed the girl away to look into her eyes. "It doesn't matter where I live or where you live. What matters is that we love each other and want to be close, understood?" Isabella nodded, smiling. "Understood." Augustus appeared shortly after, also smiling. "Lords, good to see you. Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Wellington. Please call me Augustus. After everything you've done for us, I think we're friends, don't you?" Lords smiled, still a little unaccustomed to such treatment. "All right, Augustus." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a simple but meaningful gesture. "I wanted to talk to you later, if possible. There's something I need to tell you." Lords nodded, curious, but was soon pulled away by Isabella to meet her friends, to see the presents she had received, to eat cake and play. Lords allowed herself to relax and enjoy the moment. She saw Isabella interact with other children, laughing, playing, without fear, without apparent trauma. Of course, the scars were still there, buried deep down. Isabella still had nightmares sometimes, still got nervous in enclosed spaces, still distrusted strangers. But she was improving. With therapy, with her father's love, with the support of Helena and Lords, she was healing. In the middle of the afternoon, after the children sang Happy Birthday and Isabella blew out the candles, Augustus called Lords to talk privately. They went to the mansion's library, a quiet place with walls covered in books and a large window overlooking the garden. Augustus offered Lords a chair and sat opposite her. "Lords, I've thanked you countless times for what you did, but it will never be enough. You saved my daughter. You saved my family. And you opened my eyes to things I was too blind to see." Lords shook her head. "I just did what anyone should do." "No, you did much more than that. You risked your job, your safety, to protect a child you didn't even know. And for that I want to offer you something." Augustus took a thick envelope from the table and handed it to Lords. She opened it and saw that inside was a check with an amount she had never seen in her life, £100,000. Lords's eyes widened and she immediately tried to return it. "No, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can." Augustus closed her hands over the envelope. "It's the reward I offered when Isabella disappeared. £1 million for anyone who brought information. You found her. You deserve it." "But I didn't do it for money," Lords protested, her voice trembling. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." "I know. And that's exactly why you deserve it even more. Lords, you work hard every day. You earn little, and yet you have a bigger heart than many rich people I know. Please, accept it. Use this money to improve your life. Buy a better house, rest a little, do what you've always wanted to do, but never could." Lords looked at the check, then at Augustus, and felt tears stream down her face. She thought of all the bills that always squeezed tight at the end of the month, of the shack that needed repairs, of the nights she slept, worried about the future. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, she deserved it. Not for saving Isabella, but for having given so much of herself throughout her life without ever receiving anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging the envelope to her chest. "Thank you very much." Augustus smiled. "And there's one more thing. I want to offer you a job here. Not as a cleaner, as Isabella's caregiver. She loves you, she trusts you, and I would like you to be part of our family, truly. You can continue living where you live, or you can live here, in one of the guest rooms. Whatever you prefer. The salary would be triple what you earn at the hospital, and you would have all the benefits an employee is entitled to." Lourdes was speechless. It was too generous an offer. But at the same time, something inside her hesitated. She loved Isabella. She loved being close to her. But she also had her life, her roots, her place in the world. She didn't know if she was ready to leave everything behind and enter a world that wasn't hers. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course, there's no rush, but know that the door is always open for you." Lourdes left that conversation with her head spinning. She had so much to process, so much to decide. But at that moment, all she wanted was to go back to the garden and enjoy the rest of the party with Isabella. The afternoon passed, the children left, and soon only Lourdes, Helena, Augustus, and Isabella remained. They sat on the veranda, eating leftover cake, talking about light things, laughing. It was as if, for a moment, they were just people. Not rich or poor, not bosses or employees. Just people who had been through something difficult together and were now on the other side, stronger, more united. When the sun began to set, Lourdes said goodbye. Isabella hugged her tightly and made her promise to come back soon. Lourdes promised. And as she walked to the gate, feeling the weight of the envelope in her pocket, she looked back and saw Augustus holding Isabella's hand, both waving to her, and she knew that, regardless of the decision she made about the job, those people would be part of her life forever. In the following months, a lot changed. Lourdes used part of the reward money to renovate her shack, transforming it into a real house with sturdy walls, a new roof, and a properly functioning bathroom. She used another part to help her neighbors in the community, who had always been by her side in difficult times, and she saved the rest for emergencies, to have a security she had never had before. As for the job Augustus offered, Lourdes decided to accept, but in a different way. She wouldn't live in the mansion, she wouldn't leave her community, but she would visit Isabella 3 times a week, spend the day with her, and help with whatever was needed. And she would continue working at the hospital, because that was also part of who she was. She couldn't simply abandon the place that had been her home for so long. Bianca Sterling was tried and convicted. Her lawyers tried everything, but the evidence was irrefutable. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and lost everything. Her fame, her followers, her advertising contracts. The perfect life she sold on social media collapsed like a house of cards. And now she was just another prisoner, facing the consequences of her choices. Caleb was also convicted, but as he cooperated with justice, he received a lighter sentence. 3 years in prison. Lourdes didn't feel sorry for him. He had had a choice, and he chose the wrong side. Isabella continued to grow, surrounded by love and care. She had regular therapy and gradually processed everything that had happened. Augustus became a more present, more attentive father. He had learned the hard way that money and power mean nothing if you don't have the love and trust of the people who truly matter. And Lourdes remained who she always was. A simple woman with a big heart who woke up early, worked hard, and did the best she could with what she had. But now she also knew that her life had a greater purpose, that her choices had weight, that her voice, even as a cleaner from the outskirts, had power. A year after Isabella's rescue, Lourdes was at the hospital cleaning one of the corridors when a young woman approached her. She was about 17, pregnant, with a frightened face and eyes full of tears. "Can you help me?" the girl asked, her voice trembling. Lourdes dropped the mop and approached. "Of course, my dear. What happened?" The girl told a story of abuse, of an unsupportive family, of a boyfriend who abandoned her. She said she was desperate, not knowing what to do, nowhere to go. And Lourdes listened. She listened to every word, every sob, every fear. And when the girl finished, Lourdes took her hand and said, "You are not alone. We'll help you. We'll figure this out together." And she helped. She found a place in a shelter for single mothers, talked to social workers, accompanied the girl to medical appointments. She did everything she could, using the same determination she had used to save Isabella. Because Lourdes had learned something important, that one life can make a difference in another's life, that you don't have to be rich, powerful, or famous to change the world. You just have to be willing to reach out when someone needs it. And so Lourdes Santana continued her journey, not as a hero, not as a celebrity, but as a woman who chose every day to do good, who chose to see beyond appearances, to hear beyond words, to love beyond differences. Years later, when Isabella was already a teenager, she wrote an essay at school about the person who inspired her most. And she didn't write about any celebrity, any world leader, any historical figure. She wrote about Lourdes, about the woman who found her on a rainy day, who held her in her arms when no one else cared, who fought for her when it would have been easier to look the other way. And when Isabella read that essay aloud in front of the class, her voice choked with emotion, all the students fell silent. Because that wasn't just a story of a rescue. It was a story of how love can exist in the most unexpected places, of how courage doesn't need fanfare to manifest itself, of how true greatness lies in the small daily actions of people who choose, against all odds, to be good. And Lourdes, who was in the audience that day, specially invited by Isabella, heard everything with tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. Gratitude for having had the chance to make a difference, gratitude for having met Isabella, gratitude for having lived a life that, despite all difficulties, was full of purpose. When the presentation ended and Isabella came down from the stage, she ran to Lourdes and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Auntie Lourdes, for everything." And Lourdes, her voice choked, replied, "Thank you, my love, for teaching me that it's worth believing in good, always. Because in the end, that's what remains. Not money, not fame, not power. It's the love we plant, the lives we touch, the choices we make when no one is looking." And Lourdes Santana, a simple cleaner from Manchester, had planted so much love that her roots would reach generations. And that indeed, was a legacy no one could take away. And as the sun set over Manchester, casting its last golden lights on the city, Lourdes walked back home with Isabella by her side, talking about dreams, about the future, about everything and about nothing. Two souls that fate united, that courage saved, and that love would keep together forever. Because heroes exist, but they are not always who we expect. Sometimes they are simple women, with calloused hands and immense hearts, who wake up early, work hard, and make the world a better place, one life at a time. 3 years had passed since Isabella's 6th birthday, and time had a peculiar way of healing wounds while creating new stories. Lourdes continued to wake up at 5 in the morning, but now it was no longer out of desperate necessity, but out of habit. Her body was accustomed to that rhythm, and she found that she enjoyed Manchester's silent mornings when the city was still asleep, and the sky slowly began to lighten. The house where she lived was no longer the cramped shack of before. With the reward money, she had managed to build something decent. It wasn't a mansion, far from it, but it had 2 bedrooms, a comfortable living room, a kitchen where she could cook without smoke invading everything, and a properly functioning bathroom. It even had a small garden in front, where she planted roses and jasmine that filled the air with perfume on warm afternoons. But what changed most was not the house nor the bank account that now held some savings. It was Lourdes herself. She had found something she never knew she was looking for: purpose. Since she saved Isabella, other people began to seek her out. Women from the community who needed help, young people who were lost, children who needed someone to truly see them. And Lourdes, without realizing it, became a reference. The woman who solved problems, who listened without judging, who extended a hand without expecting anything in return. On that particular morning, a common Tuesday in March, Lourdes was making coffee when she heard insistent knocking on the door. It was only 6 o'clock, too early for visitors. She opened it and found Mariana, the hospital nurse who had become her friend, her face red from running and her eyes wide with urgency. "Lords, you need to go to the hospital now," she said, still out of breath. "It's about Isabella." Lords's heart immediately raced. What happened? Is she all right?" "She's fine, physically fine," Mariana said, stepping inside and holding Lords's hands. "But something happened. Augustus had a serious health problem, a heart attack. He's in the ICU, and Isabella is panicking, asking for you." Lords wasted no time. She grabbed her bag, locked the house, and went with Mariana to the hospital. Throughout the bus ride, her heart pounded erratically. Augustus was a healthy man. He took care of his health. He exercised. How had this happened? And more importantly, how was Isabella coping with it? When they arrived at the hospital, Lords ran through the corridors she knew so well. She went up to the ICU and found Helena and Isabella sitting in the waiting room. Isabella, who was now 9 years old, was huddled in the chair, hugging her knees, her face wet with tears. When she saw Lords, she jumped up and ran into her arms. "Auntie Lords, my dad is very ill. The doctors won't let me see him." Lords picked her up, even though she was already too big for it, and held her tightly. "It's all right, my love. Your dad is strong. He's going to be fine." "But what if he isn't?" Isabella sobbed. "What if I lose him too? I already lost my mum. I can't lose my dad." Lords felt her chest tighten. Isabella's mother had passed away when the girl was only 2 years old, a victim of health complications. Isabella barely remembered her, but Lords knew that loss was always there, like a shadow in the depths of the girl's soul. And now, facing the possibility of losing her father, was too terrifying. "You won't lose him," Lords said firmly, pushing Isabella back a little to look into her eyes. "Your dad is a fighter, and he has you. He won't give up because he knows you need him." Helena approached, her eyes also red. "Lords, thank you for coming." She wouldn't stop asking for you. "How is he?" Lords asked quietly, so Isabella wouldn't hear. "Serious," Helena whispered. "It was a major heart attack. The doctors are doing their best, but the next few hours are critical." Lords nodded, trying to remain calm for Isabella. She stayed there, holding the girl, talking to her about light things, trying to distract her. She told funny stories, talked about their plans for the next weekend, about the new puppy Isabella wanted so much. Anything to take her mind off that paralyzing fear. Hours passed slowly, each minute feeling like an eternity. Doctors entered and left the ICU, but no one gave concrete news. Lords saw the anxiety grow on Helena's face, saw Isabella withdraw more and more, and she herself felt the fear growing. Augustus had become important to her, not just as Isabella's father, but as someone she respected, someone she admired for the way he had transformed after discovering the truth about Bianca. In the middle of the afternoon, finally, a doctor came out of the ICU and approached them. It was Dr. Henry, a middle-aged man with glasses and a serious expression. He looked at Helena and Lords before speaking. "Mr. Wellington is stable. We managed to reverse the critical situation, but he will need surgery. We need to perform a bypass surgery to clear the arteries. It's a delicate but necessary procedure." "And will he be all right?" Helena asked, her voice trembling. "The chances are good, but he will need a lot of rest afterwards, lifestyle changes, constant monitoring." Isabella looked at the doctor with eyes full of hope. "Can I see my dad?" Dr. Henry hesitated, then nodded. "You can, but only for a few minutes. He's sedated. He won't be able to talk to you, but you can see him." Lords accompanied Isabella to the ICU door. The girl entered slowly, scared by all those machines, by the tubes connected to her father's body, by the sound of the monitors. But when she got close to the bed and saw Augustus's face, she relaxed a little. He seemed to be sleeping peacefully. Isabella carefully took his hand and whispered, "Dad, I love you. Please be well. I need you." Lords, watching from the door, felt tears stream down her face. That scene was heartbreaking. A girl who had already been through so much, now facing another ordeal. Life was sometimes too unfair. In the following days, Augustus underwent surgery. It was a long procedure, almost 6 hours, and everyone stayed. In the waiting room, praying, hoping, waiting. Lourdes didn't leave Isabella's side for a minute. She slept at the hospital, ate little, lived in a state of constant alert. Helena was also there, equally worried. The two women took turns caring for Isabella, making sure she ate, rested, and didn't panic. When the doctor finally came out of the operating room and said that Augustus had survived, that the operation was successful, everyone broke down in tears of relief. Isabella hugged Lourdes so tightly she almost knocked her over, sobbing with happiness. "He's going to be fine, Auntie Lourdes. My dad is going to be fine." "Yes, he is, my love. I told you he was a fighter." But Augustus's recovery was slow. He spent weeks in the hospital, then more weeks at home, unable to do practically anything. He needed constant care, help getting up, eating, bathing. And it was during this period that Lourdes once again showed what she was made of. She began to go to the mansion every day, not just to care for Isabella, but to help with Augustus. She massaged his legs to prevent thrombosis, helped Helena administer his medication, and talked to him about light things to keep his spirits up. Augustus, who had always been a proud, independent man, initially resisted. He didn't want to be a burden to anyone. But Lourdes, with her infinite patience, gradually broke down these barriers. "Augustus, everyone needs help sometimes," she would say. "There's no shame in it. You've taken care of so many people in your life. Now let us take care of you." And he, little by little, began to accept. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, to be human. And in this process, he and Lourdes developed a true friendship. They talked about everything. About life, about regrets, about dreams that were never realized. Augustus spoke about how he felt when he discovered the truth about Bianca, about the guilt he carried for not having realized sooner, for having put his daughter in danger because of his own blindness. "You can't blame yourself forever," Lourdes said in one of those conversations. "You were deceived by someone who was very good at deceiving. What matters is that when you discovered the truth, you acted. You protected Isabella, you became the father she needs." "But I almost lost her," Augustus replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "If it weren't for you, I would have lost her forever. But you didn't, and she's here, happy, healthy, because you chose to do the right thing. That's what counts." One day, about 2 months after the surgery, Augustus called Lourdes for a serious conversation. They were in the mansion's garden, he sitting in a comfortable chair, still recovering, and she beside him, drinking an orange juice Helena had prepared. "Lourdes, this heart attack made me think a lot about life," he began, "about what really matters. And I realized that I spent years chasing the wrong things: money, success, appearances. And I almost lost what truly had value, Isabella. And I also lost a lot of time away from her, even when she was near. You've changed, Augustus. Anyone can see that. I changed because you showed me the way." He looked directly at her. "And for that, I want to make you a different proposal than the one I made years ago." Lourdes was curious. "What proposal?" "I want you to be Isabella's legal guardian, not to replace me, but to ensure that if something happens to me, she has someone she trusts to take care of. Her, someone who truly loves her." Lourdes was speechless. Legal guardian? That meant responsibility. It meant commitment. It meant she would be officially linked to Isabella's life in a way she never had been before. "Augustus, I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I don't have a formal education. I don't have resources. You have what matters. You have heart. You have love. You have principles. And Isabella loves you more than anyone else in the world besides me." He took her hand. "Please, give me that security. To know that if I'm no longer here, she'll be in good hands." Lourdes felt tears stream down her face. How could she say no? How could she refuse something so important? She looked at the house, where Isabella was doing homework in the library, and knew the answer. "All right, I accept." Augustus smiled, a smile of relief and gratitude. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." The paperwork was arranged, the documents signed, and so, officially, Lourdes Santana became Isabella Wellington's legal guardian. She wasn't a mother, she wasn't a grandmother. It was something unique, something that didn't have an exact name. She was The person life placed in the girl's path exactly when she needed it most. And now that connection was sealed not only by affection, but also by law. Isabella was radiant when she found out. "Does this mean you're like my real family now?" she asked, her eyes shining. "I've always been your family, my love. Now it's just on paper." Isabella hugged her, and Lourdes knew she had made the right decision. The following months brought a new routine. Augustus, fully recovered, went back to work, but in a different way. More moderate, more balanced, he began to delegate, more to trust his team, to prioritize time with his daughter. And Lourdes continued to be a constant presence in both their lives, but life had more surprises in store. One Saturday morning, while Lourdes was at the mansion helping Isabella with a school science project, Helena entered the room with a strange expression on her face. "Lourdes, someone here wants to speak with you." "With me? Who?" Helena hesitated. It's Bianca." The name dropped like a bomb. Lourdes felt her entire body tense. Bianca? After 3 years. She should have already served part of her sentence, but what did she want? Isabella, who heard the name, turned pale. "Is she here?" "She is," Helena confirmed. "She said she wants to talk to Lourdes. Only her." Lourdes looked at Isabella, who was clearly scared. "I don't have to talk to her if you don't want to, my love." But Isabella surprisingly shook her head. "No, Auntie Lourdes, talk to her. I want to know what she wants." Lourdes took a deep breath and went down to the living room. Bianca was there, sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap. She had changed. Her hair, once always impeccable, was simpler, tied in a ponytail. Her makeup was minimal, her clothes were ordinary, and there was something in her eyes that Lourdes had never seen before. It looked like regret. "Thank you for receiving me," Bianca said, her voice low. Lourdes crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "What do you want, Bianca?" "I want to apologize." The silence that followed was heavy. Lourdes hadn't expected that. "Apologize," she repeated, skeptical. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable." Bianca looked at her own hands. "I spent these years in prison thinking about everything, reliving every wrong choice I made, and I understood that I lost myself. I lost myself in ambition, in vanity, in the need to be someone important, and in the process, I hurt an innocent child. I hurt you. I hurt Augustus." Lourdes said nothing, just observed. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Bianca continued, "but I needed to come here and say this. I needed to look into your eyes and admit that you were right. You saw what I truly was when everyone else was blind. And you had the courage to act. You saved Isabella. And for that I am grateful. Even though I'm the person who almost destroyed her, I'm grateful you were there." Lourdes took a deep breath. "I don't know what you want me to say, Bianca. You did horrible things, but if you came here looking for peace, I hope you find it. Just not near Isabella. She doesn't need you in her life." "I know, and I won't seek her out. I just wanted you to know that I recognize my mistakes, and that if I can, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be a better person." Lourdes nodded. "Then I wish you luck with that. But now, I think you should go." Bianca stood up, and before leaving, looked once more at Lourdes. "You are an incredible person, Lourdes Santana. The world needs more people like you." And she left. Lourdes stood there processing that conversation. She didn't know if Bianca's repentance was real, if she had truly changed, or if it was just another manipulation. But deep down, it didn't matter. The important thing was that Isabella was safe, happy, loved, and nothing Bianca said or did would change that. When she returned to the room, Isabella asked, "What did she want?" "To apologize." "And did you forgive her?" Lourdes thought for a moment. "I don't know if I forgave her, but I let it go, because carrying anger won't change what happened, and what matters now is to move forward." Isabella hugged Lourdes. "You are the wisest person I know, Auntie Lourdes." And Lourdes smiled, because at that moment, with that girl in her arms, She knew that all the choices she had made were worth it. Every difficulty, every fear, every sleepless night, everything led to that point, and it was worth it. The years continued to pass. Isabella grew up, becoming a strong and determined teenager. Augustus aged gracefully, more present, more human. Helena continued to be the silent pillar of that family. And Lourdes continued to be the light that illuminated everyone around her. The woman who proved that greatness has nothing to do with money or social position. It has to do with love, courage, and the willingness to do what is right, always.